All right, hello and welcome back to this episode where we're going to finally explain in more details why the hell I chose to broaden the scope a little bit of the channel. The last 3 years I've been doing CI/CD and just only CI/CD, but today I have David with me to explain a little bit on why it makes sense to expand and why CI/CD in 2026 is maybe a bit boring, I would say. David, nice to have you.
Hey, I wouldn't say boring, but definitely an area that can be expanded on, and it flows, no pun intended, very naturally into platform engineering.
Yeah, and that's what I've been working on as well, like talking about the way that we do platforms, build platforms in the future. But before we go into the technical details, David, you and I think this is the first time that we're seeing ourselves on video. How did we meet? What the hell are you doing for the community? And why are you interested to talk to me about this topic?
So I am, a little bit about me. Name is David Senline. I live in New York City, not far from LaGuardia. People often buzz my house, and and I am a solo consultant. So I've got about 30 or so years experience. I was a systems administrator a long time ago. Then I moved over into software consulting, and then did cloud and brought the two together. So I've been very passionate about platforms for a long time. I've been there in the early days of CI/CD and cloud and bringing that all together. And a couple of years ago, I got involved with what was then the Platforms Working Group in the CNCF, and what is now the CNCF Platform Engineering Technical Community Group. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it is an awesome place for learning about platforms and talking to people who are all across the ecosystem and industry about it. So I participated in things like the platform maturity model, and I did quite a bit of work on platform as a product. We did some interviewing and surveys on that. I also run some outside communities, one of which is a platform coffee. So every week, alternating Wednesdays and Thursdays, we have a bunch of people who get together and just discuss, things about platforms and a lot of the socio-technical aspects of platforms. We don't necessarily go really deep into Argo and Kubernetes cross-cloud and things like that. And we do get those, and we do discuss them a bit, but a lot of it's about things like adoption and stuff like that. So the thing I'm passionate about is the people side of technology, and especially platforms, and how you get them to be effective for people, right? Because, a lot of the problems you get into, and that I've done, you build it and expect everyone to use it, and it may not meet their actual needs. Platform engineering is about making people's lives better, right?
Yeah, and it's so fascinating to talk about these topics, right? And the group that you mentioned in the CNCF has been so receptive on helping me to change a little bit the direction of what I'm doing on the channel, and also focus a bit on platform engineering. And I can see that my camera blurred. Let me try if I can get to fix that. There we are. No, we're not. Anyway, doesn't really matter. As long as you hear me, we can keep talking. It doesn't. It's not that important to see me for real. But this is strange, to be honest.
You move in a little bit, maybe, or maybe getting your Maybe I made you put your mic in the shot, and that is throwing off the camera.
Oh, but it looks way more central now than it was before. Anyway, let's keep going, and I'm gonna try to stay where I am. Okay. So we directly dived into platforms, but I wanted something else from you, David. Let's talk a bit more about the CI/CD aspects of a platform, and let's talk about why CI/CD maybe this year, 2026, is nothing that should be a focus area anymore. What do you think?
I wouldn't say nothing not being a focus area. So to give a little background on what I've done with CI/CD and kind of why it is valuable and still valuable, but part of a larger picture. So in 2013, we had a client that we built out on the cloud with full AWS environment. And back then, the only real way to do that was with the Netflix stack. So as a consulting company, we took on, I like to joke that we would use the Netflix stack from A to Z, from like Astyanax to Zool, or, you know, pick all the different A's and Z's. And so we started out with Asgard and doing, you know, these kinds of continuous, I wouldn't call it necessarily continuous delivery, but seamless, immutable deployment style work, using Jenkins and with an integrated software stack that did all of like the naming services management and microservices registration and everything. And it, you know, it was a pretty powerful system, especially for its time. We got fairly involved with Netflix over the years of really using their stack extensively, and I got to know quite a few people there. And when Spinnaker came along, we actually got involved with the launch of that. So, you know, typical Netflix style is they put stuff out there, but it really isn't necessarily usable for the broader, you know, public. If you're not running inside of Netflix, it's kind of tough.
It doesn't work, yeah.
Exactly. So I saw this happening with Spinnaker, and I saw it as such a powerful tool that like, we really need to make it so that people can kind of at least try it out and see if they want to embrace it. So we actually did all the packaging and installer stuff to make it so that you could just build a machine and launch Spinnaker and get the experience, at least the start of it. So, you know, I wanted to bring that kind of system to more people, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I've been working, you know, with CI/CD. It was a big focus of ours for years. And I would say that not everyone has it all completely wrapped up, but Kubernetes came along and made it much easier. So doing CI/CD with like just VMs on cloud, you couldn't get that really good immutable replace. Like explaining how to do immutable with VMs to people is kind of hard, right? This whole idea that you're imaging a machine and it's like got all this startup stuff that makes it run anywhere, but you have to, and like nobody even thinks about it with Kubernetes, right? Containers are the perfect immutable system. So all of that, I think one of the reasons CI/CD has kind of dropped a little in importance is because it's so much easier to do it well with containers and Kubernetes. Like you don't have, I've heard of people SSHing into containers to configure them, right? But that is widely understood to be the worst possible thing to do. You know?
Exactly, and you don't do that anymore. That's also like, it was like 10 years ago maybe when we needed to SSH or SFTP into a box to do any kind of changes.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Would you then say that the CI/CD aspect especially then also translates to doing GitOps these days, or is it more than just that to you?
It's more than that in a way, because I think GitOps is very focused on the system level, whereas CI/CD extends up into the developer, like CI especially, right? CI is the original developer experience with automation. You know, getting the build done in a central place so that you know when it's broken, when everyone's contributions are actually working well together. And so the CD aspect was something operations people were very focused on. And that became like the DevOps meeting point, right? Is the CI met the CD. So I do think it is more than, you know, just GitOps, right?
And I tend to agree to that, right? But a lot of people confuse that and mix that together somehow, right? So when we talk CI/CD, when we talk about platform engineering, how does that come together? Like, is the platform or building a platform just an evolution of a CI/CD system that works for your organization? How do you look at that?
I see platform engineering as a wide collection of capabilities, and CI/CD is a part of that. Because think about what it takes. So what it took us to build in 2013, you have to spin up, you know, with Asgard, all you got was the deployment of load balancers, and not even the deployment, just the reconfiguration of load balancers to point to new autoscaling groups. So all of that stuff with the accounts and the VPCs and the security group and like all of that configuration around the ability to just CD an app, you didn't have that, right? And a platform, a good platform, a self-service platform, is something that abstracts away all of that for the operations and the developers. Because back then, if you needed a microservice deployed, you still needed basically a cloud admin team to set everything up so that you could do it, right? And now we look at platforms as, okay, you go to this vending machine, you get the account, you get the networking, you get everything you need, and then the CD is layered on top of that to actually deliver that. And on the back end, we also give you the repos and the fixtures and the scaffolding so that the CI works to feed the CD. So there's all of these capabilities that are part of a platform that go, way outward in sort of broader scope than the CI and CD parts.
So that kind of means that if we're talking about internal developer platforms, the CI/CD is an capability of the internal developer platform and enables teams to actually iterate faster.
Yeah, and it is a core. I mean, you can't do an internal developer platform without some form of CI/CD. It is absolutely essential, right? Because the whole idea of self-service with a platform and the idea of DevOps, right, is that you have the ability to release independently, right? And that's another thing that people kind of confuse. They think that platform engineering replaces DevOps, which platform engineers are kind of moving a little bit from the DevOps background. But I think DevOps itself, without a good original definition, is interpreted differently by lots of people. And like when we started in 2013, we had DevOps engineers, and we quickly figured out like we're supposed to be doing a practice and a social thing, and we started calling them. We've had platform engineers for over 10 years in the company I used to work with. So DevOps, I think, in platform engineering becomes more powerful because a development team can own the full life cycle of what they build, what they're focused on, which is their application. They don't have to do old-fashioned DevOps where they needed an actual cloud engineer on the team in order to get anything done, because there wasn't a self-service way to get the account, the networking, all of the infrastructure stuff, and then your app on top of it.
But I do understand that, so based on what you're saying, I understand that platform engineering is also a way of abstracting information, abstracting details from the teams that are actually interacting with your platform. And with that, also the CI/CD aspect of software delivery becomes an abstraction to the teams, right? So it becomes a thing they don't think about anymore. Is that good?
Yeah, that is good, because I think the gold standard for interacting with an internal developer platform that is a full application platform is Cloud Foundry, right?
Okay.
Everyone's going back and trying to reproduce Cloud Foundry. So, the whole idea with Cloud Foundry is a developer worked in their native environment, which is Java or Ruby or, Node or whatever. And then they said, well, make a build pack for me. And the build pack system would just look at the type of repository and create the deployment artifact needed. They didn't have to edit Docker files and figure out Helm charts or anything, right? They got a bundle, right? And then they did a CF push, and that was it. Their application is going out into the world, right? And so we lost a lot of that capability when we went to a more flexible infrastructure platform with Kubernetes, but it is not an application platform, right? It's an infrastructure platform.
I didn't get that.
So with Kubernetes, the difference between Kubernetes and, say, Cloud Foundry is that Kubernetes requires you to be a Linux administrator. right? Working with containers and
True.
Kubernetes, you're basically a systems administrator. And that's a lot of cognitive load to put on a development team that's focused on delivering application features, right? They're working in whatever language, the Go, Java, Node, whatever, Python. That's what they care about. They don't care about doing apt installs or figuring out the fact that they have a libc problem or something like that. So that all gets abstracted away. And they also kind of don't care about how the thing gets out to being served up on a port and delivered.
That's true, but we still have a lot of teams that want to build against Kubernetes themselves, right? Where they don't like to be put in like caves or directions of what we want them to use.
They want
right?
they want and that's a engineering, that's a context thing. And what I mean by context is like the organization that does a particular thing will do it differently according to the makeup of the people that are there, right? There is no one, we used to treat it as there's one way. There's like this gold standard of Netflix and 12-factor apps, right? 12-factor has survived and is still valuable. But, that one way of doing CI/CD has just gone by the wayside, right? There's so many different ways of interacting with the cloud that are cloud native that it's not necessary. What you get is possibly a lot of people who really think about platform engineering rather than just solving business problems, and they tend to get over-involved in these different aspects of the technology because it's exciting, right? We had, one of the things we saw is I saw some great software engineers make the transition over to doing platform engineering. And those would typically have been the people who wanted that higher level of control, but maybe they belonged more in a bridge role because I think platform engineering is missing a lot of software people, right? It tends to be systems people.
Okay.
But you really need a lot more developers. I'd rather take a developer and get them used to cloud than take a cloud person and try and make them understand how developers work, because you're serving developers in the end.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note, and that brings us then at the end to the conversation on building a platform means building a product as well, and we can tackle that. Before we go into that, I have a follow-up question on the CI/CD aspects of the platform. Like you just said, and I think in Cloud Foundry there was like you just put in your app and it automatically deploys and packages it up. Do you think that platforms that we build for our organizations these days need to do that as well? Or can it be initially tailored on certain aspects of your business? Like you're doing Go, Java, and C#, but the platform initially launches a CI/CD capability only for Java or something like that? Or do
Absolutely.
you think
I mean, you can't take on the whole world when you build anything, really, right? That's usually the big technical project failure. It's like they try and boil the ocean, right? That's a typical term. We don't want to boil the ocean, but everyone tries to boil the ocean anyway. So, starting out, if you're trying to get adoption for your platform, identifying your earliest, most willing users and whatever they need is the most important thing, because if you try and satisfy everybody, you won't deliver, and what you do deliver will be too generic for all of the people who, want to use your platform. So yeah, absolutely. Starting out with the majority, and out of that majority, figuring out who's your best early adopter, perfect thing to do for, focus and getting adoption. Like you need to get those people on the platform first who are going to become proponents of it and sell it to everyone else.
It's so funny. I've had similar conversations with other people, right? And we all talk about the same topics all over again. And still it seems there is a lot of organizations struggling with that. Otherwise, there would not be that much community engagement on the platform engineering topic, right? So it feels like still things are in the limbo, and organizations are not able to develop platforms that work for them, I would say.
For them,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of vendor activity, I think, that kind of with every new hype cycle, Gartner hype cycle, there's a lot of business opportunity. And business opportunity, individual businesses are never flexible enough to serve everybody and shouldn't be, but they try to because of the economics of growing and everything. So you do get a lot of kind of force fit, solutions where organizations kind of feel pressured into a certain way of doing things. And so I think that hurts the ability of organizations to kind of move forward by saying, this doesn't work for us, we need to iterate. And it's the lack, a lot of organizations are not agile enough. And I don't mean practicing agile, but being iterative and experimental, right? That's still not, it's sociotechnical, right? That's people are the most interesting and hardest thing for getting platforms out there.
Yeah, that's correct. And now that we are in 2026, the platform that we built today doesn't need to serve only humans anymore, right? We also need to be able to serve agents in the future, right? And to be able to interact with agents as well. I've been reading things like you shouldn't write blog posts or do podcasts for human anymore. You should do stuff that is consumable by agents. Do you think that's also something that if we build a platform in 2026, we need to consider in terms of having the platform ready to be used, consumed, and potentially operated by AI agents?
I want to separate that into two things because I want to address the thing you said about not writing blog posts and recording podcasts. Those things are for humans. We can't completely cut humans out of everything, right? Because humans are what are driving the agents, because agents are producing stuff that ultimately needs to be it's not like we have agents talking to agents. Agents don't need to eat food, and they don't need a roof over their head, and they don't need clothes, right? And the world operates on consumer spending for those things. So we're never going to cut humans completely out, but there is an economic push, right? This capitalist push that's always necessary to figure out where do humans fit. And I don't think that goes away. And I think that it should be more authentic humans interacting for the purposes of the humans that will operate the AI agents and everything. So now to address the platform and AI, AI will make things move faster. The platform becomes the bottleneck. Or you get a very unsafe condition where the platform is the bottleneck and it starts getting bypassed. So it's exactly the thing that happened with cloud. IT was a bottleneck for getting things out there into the internet. And people just started taking their credit cards and creating all of these accounts, and you had this massive shadow IT explosion, right? If you don't provide a platform that is capable of accepting the pace of AI agents, you will have people bypassing you and connecting the agents directly to the cloud providers through MCPs or whatever they offer. And that's a really bad idea. You want these golden paths that satisfy all of the modern requirements for security and compliance and all of these things. So it is absolutely essential that you have a platform and it's capable of accepting work from agents at the pace that they require.
And does that mean that the platforms also need to be able to be completely agent interactable? Do I need to, so if I'm building a platform, do I need an MCP server? Do I need a skill?
Those should be there. So the way I see AI being used the most effectively is use AI for creative, non-deterministic processes, which is creative, right? It's creating systems and code. Once you get to the point of needing to be in production with a thing that behaves deterministically, which is most of what we need, unless you're writing a chat bot Most people are not writing chatbots. They're trying to deliver things that deliver deterministic outcomes, even if there's some creative component of the content of your application because the user is using it. When you save a file, like when a customer builds something with your system, you want it to be deterministically saved, right?
True. Yeah.
So like there's a limit to what AI will do in terms of the end product, and in terms of the flow through the system, it needs to go through the same gates humans do, right? You
True.
need to have the what's good for humans is good for AI. So all of
and
the
that
things
that includes guardrails, and that includes policies and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And having MCPs for your platform is absolutely useful in terms of this intermediate phase we're in, where humans are still using all these tools a lot more directly. They're using Claude Code, and it's not like we just give instructions to an agent. There are people doing this, but the vast majority of people are still like trying out Claude Code.
Yeah.
And I just discovered skills or something like that, right?
Yeah.
They're not to the point of like Steve Yegi and running Gastown and like these massive like agent networks and things. So you're going to need MCPs, and over time the MCPs are just going to channel the AI agents into the same things you would get the humans to do, right?
Yeah.
Make a commit to your repository of this structure, and the platform will get this application out there for you. And I don't think that should change drastically, because then you'd add a lot of non-deterministic variability, right? That would potentially circumvent all these guardrails we've been putting in place.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Like, so for me, I think having the possibility to interact with the platforms that we're building through agent makes them more accessible, and I think that's
Absolutely.
what we're aiming for, right? One of the big issues that I see in most of the internal developer platform is you need to rely on documentation and or API schemas or whatever, right, to make people understand how to use the platform. And then you still get into the problem that you cannot talk about every nice cool feature that you're adding everywhere because you're missing out on time. So making that discoverable, making the possibilities and features discoverable even by agents, right, is something that I think is going to make it.
Well, people are. I don't know how much agents are interacting with the platforms by themselves. They're doing it on behalf of people, right? And and it even might be something as simple as a person asking how to do something with a platform. So it's agents, MCPs, and the whole documentation aspect of platforms, including chatbots and such, solve a big gap in terms of self-service platforms, because the ultimate self-service platform, developer wouldn't have to figure out anything to, in order to operate it. It would be patently obvious, right? Like what you need to do. But it's very difficult to have that kind of like incredibly seamless experience. You rely on documentation, you rely on, APIs, like you said, and, that takes the self-service and adds friction when people need to go look at docs. So if you can provide them with the fastest way to figure out how to use your system, and maybe some agent tools that will allow them to do it, without, even if they could get to the documentation, maybe there's just a little bit more complexity to it than just reading the docs. So I think AI as a usability, interface to the platform is going to be a huge thing, because there are lots of organizations that will not be able to make a Netflix style platform out of the box, but they could provide, a lot of it with AI, kind of filling in those usability gaps.
Yeah, that makes sense. And now we've gone full circle, like starting from CI/CD, moving over to platform engineering, and then we ended up with agents, of course, right? I think that's, of course,
no conversation these days. Yeah. Go without.
Let's take it back to the community work that is going on the platform engineering side of the CNCF. There is a few bigger initiatives coming out of that group right now, I think. You're also involved in most of them.
I wouldn't say most of them. But I do know that there's a maturity model. There's a maturity model minor edit coming out. So we did this thing, a platform maturity model self-assessment. And while we were building that, we found a lot of just consistency issues with the maturity model. Because you're actually running through it to create a self-assessment. And we found this maturity level has these 3 items to evaluate. And then you jump up to the next one and it uses different axes. So how do you know if you're mature? And so they've done a minor refresh, and then there's a larger effort that's going to come together to kind of revamp it. So that's one area that's running. And then another area is the keynote at KubeCon was about Abby's kind of platform. You think about it as ecosystems. You have these, she's calling them platform factors, and what it is about going away from monolithic organizations, monolith platforms, and thinking about it as layers and ecosystems and collaboration of different teams and products, right, in the same environment.
Yeah.
And so that's a white paper that's on a pretty strict timeline to be published before the next KubeCon.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
And that's also how people can get involved in this group, the same way that you just mentioned. You can look out on GitHub, and maybe we can link some of the
absolutely.
directions
The community group. I always tell people, join the CNCF Slack. It's a pro. They've got a pro license, and there's, the last time I looked, there were a couple 100,000 people, right? So it's likely that anyone, if you want to talk to someone in the community, you can there with full history, which is always useful. And you can always invite people over, right? It's just this large growing community I'm focused on platform engineering, but of course everything's there, right?
Yeah, everything that the CNCF does is in that Slack, besides some of the projects that are kind of still moving in. I think it's a great place to get started as well. I would also then say, David, that's the best place to reach you right now, because that's the way I reached you. So you're pretty responsive there. Any other tips for people that want to reach out to you and get to know you?
Look on my LinkedIn. Look for I have a very simple way to join the Platform Coffee. It's just platform.cafe/group. It goes to a Google group, and you get invites in your calendar. And none of this stuff with Meetup where you have to go every week and remember to register or anything. And we get a great group of people that talk through, last week, it was a lot of AI. AI is kind of peaking in the, technology right now discussions. And we had a lot of people. If someone runs, AI for Google Cloud, show up and we had a great conversation. And
sounds interesting.
Yeah. It's a fun group, and it's also a discussion forum. We use Lean Coffee. We don't present or anything. It's just everyone votes on the topics, and we do time limited discussions. So we get to a lot of stuff.
That's cool. I'll look at that myself. Sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
David, what are we going to talk about in 3 years from now? If we have the same type of podcast again, what do you think? Let's anticipate a bit. Is it going to be platform engineering, or it's going to be agent engineering? What do you think?
The thing that's happening right now is harness engineering. So Steve Yegi's Gastown and other systems that are coming along that are about wrangling large collections of agents to get things done. And on top of that, they're even calling it meta harness engineering. For some reason, there's a progression of knowledge engineering was before agentic. And I actually think knowledge engineering was maybe just prompt management or something like that, like prompt engineering. That's not knowledge engineering. The big problem would be everyone human involved understanding context, and the agents that they're instructing also getting that same context and being able to deliver. So I don't know. I actually don't know what we're going to be talking about in 3 years. Because it feels like the pace, like just the last couple of months have been really intense in terms of what people are getting done, models that are coming out, cleaning up security. Like, what's security going to be like in 3 years, right? With these massive models that are like
Great
cleaning up the
question, yeah.
Linux kernel, right? So I can't really say. It'll be about thinking, and I firmly hope about people being involved and starting to think about problems at a, I can tell you it would be a very different level. Even people coming into technology and software engineering right now, they're not learning CSS, they're not learning HTML, they're barely learning any JavaScript. It's just not necessary anymore, right? So I don't know what's going to be not necessary in 3 years.
And I agree to that, but it's still exciting to be alive at this part of, like, I would say, a development shift in our industry, right? So it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
David, thank you very much. I think, and I hope that this helped the audience to understand a little bit why the hell CI/CD is not the core topic of the channel anymore. If you think we did a bad job at that, please let us know in the comments so we can actually try to do better next time. And to you, David, thank you for spending time with me. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experience. And I think this was very valuable, at least to me.
Absolutely. This was a lot of fun.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I just need to find the stop recording button. There we are.